The sun of Madrid pierced through the heavy crimson velvet curtains of the royal palace, casting faint golden rays across the marble floor. In the eastern wing, where the royal chambers were located, an unusual silence had overtaken the normally bustling corridors. Servants tiptoed about, exchanging worried glances, while the guards stood stiffer than usual. In the main bedroom, Queen Isabella of Bourbon and Medici lay exhausted on silken sheets, her face pale as wax, with strands of black hair clinging to her sweat-soaked forehead. Beside her, King Philip I observed with a grim expression the small bundle that a nursemaid carefully held. "Your Majesty, it is a boy," announced the royal physician, Don Francisco de Quevedo, his voice attempting to feign enthusiasm but unable to conceal a certain unease. The king approached slowly. This was his fifth child, but the first with a chance of surviving childhood. The previous ones had succumbed to various illnesses before their third year, plunging the Spanish court into constant anxiety about the succession. "Let me see him," Philip commanded, extending his arms. The nursemaid hesitated for a moment, a hesitation that did not escape the monarch, before handing him the newborn. As the little prince rested in his father's arms, something strange occurred. The king frowned and brought his nose closer to the baby, wrapped in fine cloths embroidered with gold threads. "What is that smell?" he asked in a barely audible voice. The royal physician stepped closer cautiously. "Your Majesty, we have bathed the prince with the finest oils and ointments." "That's not it," Philip interrupted. "It's something else." At that moment, the Duchess of Medina Sidonia, Doña Luisa de Guzman, who had been present at the birth as the Queen's lady-in-waiting, approached. At over 60 years old, with experience attending dozens of noble births, she was known for her bluntness. "It is the smell of death, Your Majesty," she said quietly but firmly. "I have sensed it before on battlefields and in houses ravaged by the plague." A deathly silence fell over the room. The Queen, still weakened, sobbed softly. The king, his face now ashen, mechanically handed the baby back to the nursemaid. "No one, absolutely no one outside this room must know of this," he ordered in a sharp voice. "Prince Carlos Baltazar will be presented to the court in 3 days, as tradition dictates. In the meantime, the best physicians in the kingdom will examine him. And you, Francisco, will not leave his side for a moment." The royal physician nodded, though his face betrayed deep concern. Something about this child was unnatural, but he dared not say so in front of the king. 3 weeks later, in the king's private study, Don Francisco reported to a small group consisting of the monarch, his personal advisor, the Count Duke of Olivares, and surprisingly, a foreign visitor, Dr. Heinrich von Leyden, the personal physician of the Austrian emperor and a distant relative of the Spanish royal family. "Your Majesty, we have thoroughly examined the prince," Don Francisco began, avoiding the king's direct gaze. "His physical development appears normal for a newborn, though he exhibits an unusual pallor. He feeds well and cries vigorously, but the smell persists. At times, it even grows stronger." "And what does science say about this?" asked the Count Duke, a shrewd and pragmatic man who had been the king's right hand for decades. "Modern science has no explanation, my lord," Francisco replied. "I have consulted all available medical texts, from Galen to the latest studies from the University of Salamanca. There is no record of a similar case." The king rose from his seat and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. In the distance, he could see nobles strolling, oblivious to the crisis unfolding behind the stone walls. "And you, Dr. von Leyden, have you encountered anything like this in your years of practice?" The Austrian physician, a lean man with piercing blue eyes and a neatly trimmed white beard, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I have treated the European nobility, including many members of your family, for 40 years. Regarding Prince Carlos, I have observed something similar, though never so pronounced, in other branches of the Habsburgs. The silence that followed was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Everyone in the room understood the implications of his words. Marriages between close relatives were common in European royal houses, particularly among the Habsburgs, to preserve the purity of the bloodline and secure political alliances. "Go on," the king commanded, his voice betraying a mix of fear and resignation. "I call it genetic necrosis, Your Majesty," von Leyden explained. "It is as if the body is already partially dead at birth. The tissues decay faster than in ordinary people. I have seen similar symptoms in the Archdukes of Austria, though in different forms: deformed jaws, mental disorders, inability to produce healthy offspring." "Are you saying my son is cursed?" Philip interrupted in a barely audible voice. Von Leyden met the king's gaze with professional dignity. "Not exactly, Your Majesty. The prince may live many years, perhaps even reach adulthood, but his life will be different, and it is likely that the smell will never disappear." "Is there no cure? Nothing medicine can do?" asked the Count Duke. "Not with current medicine," von Leyden replied. "But there are treatments that can alleviate the symptoms: special baths, specific diets, exercises to strengthen his constitution." The king turned to the others, his face a mask of resolve. "Then we will do everything possible, and in the meantime, no one, absolutely no one outside this room must know the true nature of the prince's condition. Olivares, devise an explanation for the court, something about a special perfume the prince must wear for ceremonial reasons." "Yes, Your Majesty," the Count Duke nodded. "And you, Dr. von Leyden, I offer you double your current salary to remain in Madrid as the prince's personal physician." The Austrian bowed his head. "It is an honor, Your Majesty, but I must discuss this with the Emperor." "I will send a personal letter requesting your services," Philip replied. "This goes beyond politics. It is about the survival of our dynasty." 5 kilometers from the royal palace, in the Lavapiés quarter, a 17-year-old young woman hurried through narrow alleys. Ana Maria Hernandez, daughter of a respected but modest apothecary, carried a carefully wrapped package. Her father had received an unusual commission to prepare a special ointment from herbs imported from the New World, some so rare he had never heard of them. The royal messenger had been clear: the ointment must be delivered before nightfall, and no one was to know of its existence. The payment was generous enough to ensure her family's comfort for months. Ana Maria turned a corner and nearly collided with a group of young nobles, laughing loudly. Among them, she recognized Diego de Velázquez, the apprentice to the court painter, who greeted her with a discreet gesture. "Ana Maria, what brings you here?" he asked, briefly stepping away from his companions. "My father's business," she replied, clutching the package protectively to her chest. Diego studied her curiously. At 20, he was already known for his exceptional talent and sharp observational skills. "It must be important if he sent you alone, protective as he is." Ana Maria shrugged, downplaying the matter. "Just herbs, nothing extraordinary for the court, I suppose." "There are rumors that the little prince is not well," Diego pressed. "They say he has a strange smell that no perfume can mask." A chill ran through the young woman. Her father had given her no details about the ointment's purpose, but now the pieces began to fall into place. "You shouldn't listen to rumors," she replied, striving to sound casual. "I must go. It's getting late." Diego nodded, but his eyes betrayed his skepticism. "Take care, Ana Maria. The palace's secrets are often dangerous for those who know them." With that, the young painter rejoined his friends, leaving Ana Maria with a sense of unease. She quickened her pace, aware that what she carried might be far more significant than she had imagined. Near the palace, at a nearby square, a man in simple but high-quality clothing approached her. "Do you bring the apothecary Hernandez's order?" he asked softly. Ana Maria nodded and handed over the package. The man inspected it briefly before giving her a small pouch that jingled with the weight of coins. "Your father has served the crown well," he said. "It is possible we will require more of his services in the future." As the man walked away, Ana Maria could not suppress her curiosity. What illness could the prince have that required such strange treatments? And why all the secrecy? She had no idea that she would soon be far more entangled in this mystery than she could ever have imagined. Time passed relentlessly at the Spanish court. Prince Carlos Baltazar had reached the age of 6 and, against all expectations, enjoyed relatively good health for the time. Physically, he was a delicate but not sickly child, with the characteristic protruding Habsburg jaw and dark, piercing eyes that observed the world with a wisdom unusual for his age. Yet the smell persisted. Over the years, Dr. von Leyden had tried dozens of treatments, from the apothecary Hernandez's ointments to exotic remedies from the farthest reaches of the Spanish Empire. Some provided temporary relief, but none offered a lasting solution. The court had adapted to this peculiarity with the discretion characteristic of Spanish nobility. Officially, the prince wore a ceremonial perfume symbolizing his divine connection, an explanation carefully crafted by the Count Duke of Olivares that no one dared to openly question. In private circles, courtiers spoke of the perfumed prince and discreetly covered their noses with rosewater-soaked handkerchiefs when near him. The young prince was aware of his peculiarity. At a surprisingly young age, he had begun to notice the glances, gestures, and distance maintained even by his closest tutors. With a keen mind, he had realized that something about him provoked repulsion. On his 5th birthday, during one of his daily sessions with Dr. von Leyden, he addressed it directly. "Why do I smell different, doctor?" he asked in a clear, firm voice as he sat on his small throne while the physician checked his pulse. Surprised, the Austrian looked at the child with a mix of pity and respect. After consulting with the king, they decided to tell him a simplified version of the truth. He had a unique condition among European princes that caused his body to produce a different smell. It was neither good nor bad, simply part of who he was. Since then, Carlos had shown remarkable acceptance of his condition, as if he understood the weight of the crown he would one day inherit and saw his condition as another burden to bear with royal dignity. On his 6th birthday, the king organized a special celebration. For the first time, the prince would participate in a public event beyond formal balcony appearances or processions, where distance separated him from the people. It was a limited audience with select nobles and their children, but it marked an important step in integrating the future monarch into courtly life. "Are you nervous, Your Highness?" asked Maria of Austria, his chief nursemaid, as she adjusted the lace collar of his blue velvet suit. Carlos shook his head. "No, Maria. I have practiced my bows and know the names of all the dukes and their children." The woman smiled tenderly. Despite his condition, or perhaps because of it, the prince had developed remarkable poise and dignity for his age. He spent hours studying protocol, history, and Latin, showing a dedication that surprised even his strictest tutors. "Do you think they will like me?" the child asked suddenly, letting a moment of vulnerability slip through his royal facade. Maria hesitated briefly. "You are the Prince of Spain, the future king of the greatest empire the world has ever seen. It is not about being liked, but commanding respect." Carlos nodded, though his eyes revealed he understood the evasive nature of her response. The throne room was decorated with fresh flowers strategically placed to fill the air with their scent. Silver candelabras held fragrant candles, and the windows were open to allow air to circulate. Every detail was meticulously planned to minimize the perception of the prince's smell. When Carlos entered, announced by pages, the attendees bowed deeply. Among them was Ana Maria Hernandez, now 23 and socially elevated through the court's favor. Her father had died 2 years earlier, but she had continued the family business, specializing in treatments for the prince and earning a position as Dr. von Leiden's assistant. Ana Maria watched as the little prince advanced with measured steps. There was something touching in his childish dignity, in the way he held his head high despite being aware of the gazes following him. Since working at the court, she had developed a particular fondness for the child, impressed by his intelligence and the strength with which he bore his condition. The protocol dictated that the nobles would present their children to the prince, who greeted them with a brief nod. Everything proceeded as planned until it was the turn of the son of the Duke of Medina Kelly, a 7-year-old boy known for his arrogant temperament. "Your Highness," the young noble said as he bowed, "my father says you smell like the tombs of the Escorial." A collective gasp swept through the room. The Duke of Medina Kelly paled and grabbed his son's shoulder firmly. "Insolent boy, apologize immediately." Carlos remained impassive, his face a mask of composure. Then he replied in a clear voice that echoed in the suddenly silent hall, "The tombs of the Escorial hold the kings of Spain, my ancestors. If I smell like them, it is because I carry their blood and their destiny." Ana Maria held her breath, impressed by the prince's response. Beside her, Dr. von Leiden nodded approvingly. From his throne, King Philip displayed a proud smile. The rest of the ceremony proceeded without incident, but the exchange quickly became the talk of the palace corridors. "The prince has his father's wit and his mother's dignity," the courtiers commented, their voices tinged with newfound respect. That night, as Ana Maria prepared the prince's nightly bath with special salts from Persia, Carlos watched her curiously. "Señora Hernandez, do you also think I smell like the tombs?" he asked suddenly. Ana Maria paused in her work and looked directly at the child. "Your Highness, every person has their own scent. Yours is simply different." "But unpleasant," Carlos insisted. "Different," she corrected gently. "And in my case, I'm so used to it that I hardly notice it anymore." The prince seemed to ponder this response, dipping a hand absent-mindedly into the fragrant water. "Dr. von Leiden says my condition is hereditary. Do you know what that means?" "It means it comes from your ancestors, Your Highness," Ana Maria replied. "And my children will smell like this too?" he asked with childish innocence, yet with dynastic implications. Ana Maria was momentarily speechless. "Medicine advances every day, Your Highness," she said. "By the time you have children, we may have found a cure." Carlos nodded, seemingly satisfied with this response. He removed his robe and slipped into the bath as Ana Maria washed his hair with gentle, efficient movements. "The boy from Medina Celi was cruel, but honest," the prince commented as he rinsed off. "I prefer honesty to whispered lies." "You are wise for your age, Your Highness," Ana Maria replied, surprised by the maturity of his observation. "It's not wisdom," Carlos countered. "It's necessity. A king cannot afford to live in ignorance, not even a king who smells of death." Those words, spoken in the high-pitched voice of a child but with the weight of an adult, left a deep impression on Ana Maria. That night, as she returned to her quarters in the servants' wing, she made a decision. She would intensify her research, study ancient texts, and consult healers from all regions of the empire if necessary. She would find a cure for the prince who smelled of death, not for the sake of the dynasty, but for the child who bore his burden with such dignity. Thousands of kilometers away in Vienna, another member of the House of Habsburg faced his own genetic challenges. Archduke Leopold Wilhelm, brother of Emperor Ferdinand III and a second cousin of King Philip I of Spain, suffered from increasingly frequent bouts of madness. In one of his lucid moments, he dictated a letter to his secretary, addressed to His Majesty Philip I of Spain. "Dear cousin," it began, "I have received news of the condition of young Prince Carlos Balthazar. Though our afflictions take different forms, we share the same blood. In my moments of mental clarity, I have devoted my studies to understanding what plagues us. I have found ancient texts suggesting that our condition might be alleviated through a specific ritual. I send you these pages with my most trusted courier. They describe practices not recognized by the Church, yet in my desperation, I have found some solace in them. Blood calls to blood. Life can renew what death corrupts. Your faithful cousin, Leopold Wilhelm of Habsburg." The courier set out for Madrid, carrying documents that contained forbidden knowledge, pagan rituals cloaked in a Christian veneer to make them palatable to the staunchly Catholic Spanish court. What no one knew was that these texts concealed practices that, if discovered, could be deemed heretical by the Inquisition. The letter reached King Philip at a moment when the royal physicians faced a new crisis. Despite all treatments, Prince Carlos's smell had suddenly worsened, accompanied by an inexplicable fever that confined him to his bed. Dr. von Leyden had exhausted his resources and, for the first time in 6 years, feared for the life of the heir to the throne. In his desperation, the king summoned Anna Maria to his private chambers, an unprecedented act for a woman of her status. "Señora Hernandez, Dr. von Leyden speaks highly of your skills and knowledge," the monarch said, his face showing the exhaustion of sleepless nights. "My cousin, Archduke Leopold, sent these documents. They contain unorthodox practices." Anna Maria took the papers with trembling hands. "You wish me to study them, Your Majesty?" "I wish you to save my son," Philip replied, his voice breaking with emotion. "As a king, I cannot officially sanction these practices. As a father, I will do whatever is necessary." Anna Maria nodded, understanding the monarch's dilemma. "I will study these documents immediately, Your Majesty, and if I find anything that can help the prince, I will implement it on my own responsibility." "The crown will protect you, of course," the king added, "but we must be discreet. The Inquisition has eyes and ears everywhere." That same night, Anna Maria locked herself in her small laboratory within the palace. The document sent by the Archduke described rituals of blood renewal based on ancient pagan practices from Eastern Europe. The core premise was that new blood could purify corrupted blood if a ceremonial exchange was performed under specific conditions. By the light of a candle, Anna Maria studied the texts with a mix of scientific fascination and religious unease. As the daughter of an apothecary trained in empirical traditions, she recognized elements that might have medical merit. As a Spaniard raised in the Catholic faith, she shuddered at the ritualistic aspects that bordered on heresy. After hours of analysis, she reached a conclusion. She would adapt the procedure, eliminating the pagan elements and focusing on what seemed scientifically grounded. She would need fresh blood from a healthy, preferably young donor, unrelated to the Habsburgs, mixed with specific herbs before being administered to the prince. The risk was immense. If the procedure failed, she could lose the court's favor and face accusations of witchcraft, or even an attempt on the heir's life. But if it succeeded, it could alleviate the young prince's suffering and secure the dynasty's continuity. With determination, Anna Maria began making the necessary preparations. The fate of the child who smelled of death now rested, at least in part, in her hands. The night chosen for the procedure was dark and moonless, as if the heavens themselves wished to conceal what was to take place deep within the royal palace. Anna Maria had carefully selected this date, not out of superstition, but for practical reasons. It coincided with the absence of most courtiers, who had traveled to a religious festival in Escorial. In a small chamber adjacent to the prince's quarters, Anna Maria had prepared everything. An oak table covered with a white linen cloth held glass vials of herbal extracts. A small silver scalpel, the metal said to least affect the blood's properties, according to the Archduke's texts, and several glazed ceramic vessels. Dr. von Leyden watched with a grave expression as Anna Maria made final preparations. The Austrian physician had agreed to participate after much deliberation, ultimately persuaded by the prince's deteriorating condition and the king's tacit approval. "Are you certain, Hernandez?" he asked quietly. "What you propose goes beyond known medicine." Anna Maria adjusted the wick of an oil lamp before responding. "I am not certain, doctor, but I have studied the Archduke's texts and removed what seemed mere superstition. What remains has a certain medical logic, however rudimentary." "And the donor?" von Leyden asked, glancing at the closed door. "He will be here any moment," she replied. "I have chosen someone young, healthy, and unconnected to the royal house." As if summoned, a soft knock sounded at the door. Anna Maria took a deep breath before opening it, revealing a tall, robust young man of about 20, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that partially hid his face. "Diego," she greeted, letting him enter. Diego de Velázquez, now an official court painter and a trusted friend of Anna Maria's since their youth in Lavapiés, bowed respectfully to Dr. von Leyden. When Anna Maria explained the prince's situation, "I could not refuse," the artist said, removing his hat. "If my blood can help the heir to Spain's throne, it is a small price for the honor the crown has granted me." Von Leyden scrutinized the young painter with a clinical gaze, noting his clear, healthy skin, fluid movements, and the intelligence sparkling in his eyes. "An excellent donor," he murmured, almost to himself. Anna Maria explained the procedure with methodical calm, as if describing the preparation of an ordinary medicine rather than a ritual adapted from forbidden texts. "I will draw a small amount of blood from your arm, Diego. I will mix it with these extracts and administer it to the prince through a superficial incision on his forearm. The entire process must be completed before the blood coagulates." "Will it hurt?" a childish voice asked from the door leading to the royal chambers. The three adults turned, startled. Prince Carlos, in his nightshirt and with a feverish pallor, watched them with bright, curious eyes. "Your Highness, you should be resting," von Leyden said, hurrying to guide him back to bed. "I don't want to rest," the child replied with unexpected resolve. "I want to know what you're doing to me." Anna Maria exchanged a glance with the physician before approaching the prince and kneeling to his eye level. "We are going to try a new treatment, Your Highness. It is experimental, but we believe it could improve your condition." Carlos nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "Will you use blood?" he asked, pointing to the instruments on the table. "Yes, Your Highness," Anna Maria replied, deciding honesty was the best approach. "A small amount of blood from Señor Velázquez, mixed with medicinal herbs." The prince studied the painter with interest. "You are Velázquez, the one who painted my father's portrait on horseback?" Diego bowed. "The same, Your Highness." Carlos approached the artist with unsteady steps. "My nursemaid says you have hands blessed by God. Perhaps your blood is too." This comment, spoken with a child's innocence but an unsettling gravity for his age, caused a brief silence in the room. Anna Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. Somehow the prince had grasped the essence of what they were attempting. A transfer not just of blood, but of vitality, of health, almost like a blessing. "Very well," Dr. von Leyden said, regaining his professional composure. "Since your Highness is awake, it may be best to proceed now. The fever has temporarily subsided, which is favorable for the procedure." The prince was settled in a chair with strategically placed cushions to support his fragile body. Diego sat on a stool beside him, rolling up his sleeve to expose his arm. Anna Maria worked with precise movements, heating the instruments over a candle flame to sterilize them, as she had learned from her father. "You'll feel a pinch, Señor Velázquez," she warned, applying a mixture of alcohol and herbs to disinfect the painter's skin. Diego nodded, his eyes fixed on the procedure. As an artist, he had a natural interest in technical processes, even those so far removed from his own discipline. Anna Maria made a clean incision in his forearm, collecting the flowing blood in a small ceramic bowl. She added drops of various herbal extracts, mentally reciting the proportions she had studied from the Archduke's documents. Meanwhile, Dr. von Leyden prepared the prince's arm, explaining each step in a soothing voice to keep him calm. "Does it hurt a lot?" Carlos asked Diego, watching the blood flow from his arm. "No more than a scratch, Your Highness," the painter replied with an encouraging smile. "I've suffered worse mixing pigments for your father." This response seemed to please the prince, who nodded with an air of complicity. When the mixture was ready, Anna Maria warmed it slightly over the oil lamp. The liquid, now a darker red with a peculiar sheen, emitted a scent that partially masked the prince's characteristic odor. "We are ready," she announced, approaching with the bowl and a small silver scalpel. Carlos extended his arm without hesitation, with a trust that moved those present. Anna Maria made a shallow incision, just deep enough to draw a few drops of blood, and applied the mixture directly to the wound, allowing the two bloods to mingle. Von Leyden watched with clinical attention, while Diego, now with a bandage on his arm, observed the scene with the focused intensity he brought to studying a portrait subject. "Now we must wait," Anna Maria said, carefully bandaging the prince's arm. The following hours passed in tense vigilance. Surprisingly, the prince showed no immediate signs of discomfort and fell into a deep sleep shortly after the procedure. Von Leyden monitored his vital signs continuously, while Anna Maria prepared infusions to keep everyone alert. "It's fascinating," Diego commented quietly, sitting by the window and sketching in a small notebook. "In my art, I mix pigments to create something new. You've mixed blood to achieve the same effect. The comparison is poetic, but imprecise," von Leyden replied with a slight smile. "The human body is far more complex than any canvas, and far more mysterious," Anna Maria added, watching the sleeping prince. "What we do is as much faith as science." At that moment, Carlos stirred in his sleep, murmuring unintelligible words. The three adults tensed, ready for any adverse reaction. But when the prince opened his eyes, there was a clarity in them that had not been seen in weeks. "I'm hungry," he declared simply, sitting up with more energy than he had shown in days. Von Leyden quickly approached and felt his forehead with practiced hands. "The fever is gone," he announced with barely concealed astonishment. Anna Maria stepped closer and noticed something even more remarkable. "The smell has noticeably diminished." The three exchanged glances of cautious hope. Could it be possible that the procedure had worked? Or was it merely a temporary improvement, like so many they had seen before? The following weeks confirmed the unimaginable. The treatment had a significant effect. The prince's characteristic smell, though not entirely gone, was reduced to a level that could be easily masked with conventional perfumes. His overall health improved remarkably, and he displayed a vigor that surprised even the most optimistic. King Philip, informed of the procedure's success, summoned Anna Maria for a private audience. The young apothecary, now elevated to the rank of special physician to His Royal Highness, a position created specifically for her, appeared with the humility that had always defined her. "You have achieved what the best physicians in Europe deemed impossible," the monarch declared, studying her with a piercing gaze. "The crown of Spain is in your debt." "I have only applied knowledge discovered by others, Your Majesty," Anna Maria replied, bowing her head. "And the credit belongs equally to Dr. von Leyden and Signor Velázquez. Velázquez will receive additional commissions and an increase in his pension," the king stated. "Von Leyden has been appropriately rewarded. As for you," Philip paused, weighing his words, "I understand the treatment must be repeated regularly." "Yes, Your Majesty. Based on our observations, the effects last approximately 1 month. After that, the smell begins to intensify again." The king nodded, as if this confirmed his own conclusions. "Then your presence at court will be required indefinitely. I will grant you a minor noble title to ease your position and avoid gossip. Countess of Lavapiés, does that sound fitting?" Anna Maria struggled to hide her surprise. A noble title was something she, as the daughter of a simple apothecary, could never have imagined. "It is an undeserved honor, Your Majesty." "On the contrary," the king countered, "it is scarcely enough for securing the continuity of our dynasty. Besides," he added with a barely perceptible smile, "my son seems to hold you in high regard. He asks for you constantly." This did not surprise Anna Maria. Since the procedure, she had developed a special bond with the young prince, who sought her out not only for his treatments, but also for conversations about herbs, natural sciences, and even to have stories read to him. In a way, she had become a maternal figure to the child, whose own mother, Queen Isabella, maintained the formal distance typical of royal upbringing. "He is an exceptional child, Your Majesty," she replied sincerely. "His intelligence and dignity are admirable, especially given the challenges he has faced." The king seemed pleased with this response. When Carlos reaches adulthood and fully understands his condition, he will need loyal allies, people who know him not only as a prince, but as the child he is now. Anna Maria understood the unspoken message. Her role extended beyond that of a mere provider of treatments. She had become part of the inner circle, tasked with protecting the future king. Over time, the procedure was repeated monthly with minor variations. Diego de Velázquez remained the primary donor and developed a mentor-student relationship with the prince, who showed a certain talent for drawing. Von Leyden oversaw each session, meticulously documenting the effects and adjusting the proportions of the herbal mixture as needed. By the time Carlos turned 10, the treatment had become so integral to palace life that few remembered the intensity of the smell that had once defined the prince. Courtiers attributed the improvement to the child's natural maturation or to von Leyden's conventional treatments, unaware of the monthly ritual conducted in strict secrecy. But this calm was disrupted by an unexpected event. During a diplomatic visit, Archduke Leopold Wilhelm, cousin of the king and the source of the documents that inspired the treatment, requested a private audience with the monarch and the prince. In a secluded chamber, with only von Leyden and Anna Maria present as medical advisors, the Archduke studied young Carlos with an almost predatory intensity. "The blood has worked," he declared finally, turning to the king. "The child has good color, and the smell is barely perceptible. My congratulations, cousin." Philip bowed his head in gratitude, though his expression remained cautious. "Your documents were invaluable, Leopold. The crown of Spain is in your debt." Leopold waved dismissively. "We are family, Philip. The Habsburgs must help each other survive our peculiarities." He turned to Anna Maria, studying her curiously. So you are the apothecary who adapted my texts. Impressive, especially for a woman. Then, in a lower voice, he added, but I suspect you omitted crucial aspects of the ritual. I adapted the procedure to modern medical practices, Your Excellency, Anna Maria replied firmly. The ceremonial elements seemed unnecessary. Leopold smiled, a smile that did not reach his eyes. Rituals are never unnecessary, my dear Countess. They are the language through which we speak to forces older than our understanding. This comment caused an uneasy silence. Von Leyden cleared his throat, clearly eager to change the subject. The prince has responded exceptionally well to the treatment, the physician reported. His physical and mental development matches that of a child his age. In some respects, it is even superior. And the donor? Leopold asked abruptly. Is it still the same? Yes, Your Excellency, von Leyden replied. The painter Velázquez has proven ideal for this purpose. The Archduke frowned. A mistake. You should rotate donors. The blood adapts, loses its effectiveness. Carlos, who had been silently following the conversation, spoke suddenly. I like Señor Velázquez's blood. It makes me strong. Leopold turned to the child, studying him with renewed interest. Of course, young prince, the blood of an artist is full of life and creativity. But eventually, you will need something stronger. Anna Maria felt a chill at these words and the gaze that accompanied them. Something about the Archduke deeply unsettled her, a quality that went beyond aristocratic eccentricity. That night, as she prepared herbs for the next treatment in her laboratory, Anna Maria received an unexpected visitor. Leopold Wilhelm, accompanied only by a silent servant who remained at the door, entered her workspace unannounced. Countess, he greeted with a minimal bow. Forgive the intrusion, but I wish to speak with you privately. Anna Maria tensed, aware of the impropriety of the situation but too cautious to point it out. How may I serve you, Your Excellency? Leopold stepped closer, examining the vials and preparations on her work table. You have done admirable work with the prince, truly admirable, but incomplete. Incomplete, she repeated, maintaining her composure. The texts I sent contained specific instructions for the full ceremony, the Archduke explained, picking up a vial and studying it in the lamplight. Instructions you seem to have deliberately ignored. I adapted the procedure to accepted medical practices, Your Excellency, Anna Maria replied firmly, and the results have been satisfactory. Satisfactory, Leopold repeated, letting out a short, humorless laugh. You have managed to suppress the symptoms, not cure the disease. The genetic necrosis is still there, dormant, but not defeated. Anna Maria held his gaze. And what would you suggest? Leopold stepped closer, so close that Anna Maria caught his scent, which was strangely similar to the prince's, but with a different, almost sickly sweet note. The painter's blood has served so far, he said softly, almost whispering. But for a true cure, you need special blood. Innocent blood. Anna Maria instinctively stepped back. What are you proposing, Your Excellency? Nothing that has not been done before for the survival of our dynasty, Leopold replied with eerie calm. A small sacrifice for a greater good. The blood of a child, freely offered by its parents in exchange for wealth and titles, could heal the prince permanently. The horror Anna Maria felt must have shown on her face, for Leopold smiled with a kind of indulgence. I see the idea unsettles you. You are young and do not yet understand the needs of great houses. But consider it, Countess, a single sacrifice to secure the future of Spain and all of Europe. I would never participate in such a thing, Anna Maria replied, her voice trembling slightly with indignation. And His Majesty would never allow it. Are you certain? Leopold asked, raising an eyebrow. Philip is a king, but also a desperate father. Kings have done worse for their heirs. Before Ana Maria could respond, the door flew open. Diego de Velázquez, pale but resolute, entered, followed by 2 royal guards. His Majesty requests your immediate presence, Your Excellency, the painter announced with strained formality. Leopold studied the newcomers with an impassive expression. Of course, we must not keep my royal cousin waiting. As the Archduke departed, escorted by the guards, Diego approached Ana Maria. Are you all right? He asked quietly, dropping the formal protocol they usually maintained in public. Ana Maria nodded, though her hand still trembled. How did you know? The prince, Diego replied. The Archduke spoke with him after the meeting. Carlos didn't understand everything, but enough to be alarmed. He came to me immediately. This revelation surprised Ana Maria. The young prince, whom everyone sought to protect, had ultimately protected her. We must speak with the king, she decided. The Archduke's proposals are monstrous. Diego nodded gravely. He is already informed, which is why he summoned Leopold. That night, Archduke Leopold Wilhelm left the Spanish court with an escort that felt more like a guard than an honor. The incident was never officially mentioned, but the grateful looks the king directed at Ana Maria and Diego in the following days spoke volumes. What no one could foresee was that this seemingly resolved incident would have consequences that extended far beyond the palace walls, influencing not only the future of the prince who smelled of death, but the fate of the Habsburg dynasty in Spain itself. 2 years later, as Carlos celebrated his 12th birthday, a new challenge arose. Diego de Velázquez, after years as a regular donor, began showing signs of weakness. Nothing severe or alarming, but enough to concern von Leyden. The constant bloodletting is affecting his health, the physician explained to Ana Maria as they reviewed the latest results of the prince's treatment. We must find an alternative, or at least a supplementary donor. The Archduke suggested rotating donors, Ana Maria recalled reluctantly. Though his motives were questionable, he may have been right on this point. The problem, von Leyden replied, is finding someone suitable, a healthy person, unrelated to the Habsburgs, and absolutely trustworthy. Ana Maria considered the issue in silence. The solution was obvious, but neither dared to voice it. Finally, she spoke. I could be the alternative donor. Von Leyden looked at her for a long moment before responding. It's a possibility I've considered. Your health is excellent, and you are undoubtedly trustworthy. But I'm a woman, Ana Maria added with an ironic smile. That doesn't concern me from a medical perspective, the physician clarified, but it could complicate matters from a courtly perspective. You know how rumors are. Ana Maria understood perfectly. As a woman spending significant time with the prince, she was already the subject of some speculation despite her title and official position. The prince's health takes precedence, she decided. I will speak with His Majesty personally. King Philip, upon hearing the proposal, was pragmatic. If Dr. von Leyden approves this from a medical standpoint, I see no objection. As for rumors, there will always be those. The crown will protect you, as always. Thus began a new phase in the prince's treatment. Diego remained the primary donor, but Ana Maria contributed regularly, allowing the painter to recover between sessions. Surprisingly, this combination seemed to have an even more positive effect on Carlos, whose health and vitality reached unprecedented levels. The prince, now on the cusp of adolescence, developed a complex and fascinating personality. He retained the dignity and poise that had distinguished him as a child, but also displayed an insatiable intellectual curiosity and genuine interest in art and science. Under Velázquez's guidance, he made remarkable progress in drawing and painting, while Ana Maria's lessons on botany and natural medicine complemented his formal education. In private moments, Carlos began referring to them as his true family, a comment that, if overheard by less discreet ears, could have sparked a scandal at court. For the young prince, the bond formed through years of treatments and intimate conversations was more meaningful than the formal, distant relationships he maintained with most royal family members. One day, as Anna Maria prepared an infusion in her small laboratory, now a permanent fixture in the prince's wing, Carlos entered unannounced, a habit that had become routine. "Have you ever wondered if we are truly who we think we are?" he asked without preamble, sitting on a stool across from her. Anna Maria looked at him curiously. At 12, Carlos was still slight in stature, but had shed the fragility of his childhood. His face, with its distinctive Habsburg jaw, showed a maturity unusual for his age. "That's a profound question, Your Highness. What prompted it?" Carlos toyed absently with an empty vial. "I've been reading about blood, how it carries the essence of who we are. You and Diego have been giving me your blood for years. Doesn't that mean I'm partly you now?" Anna Maria felt a chill at the acuity of his comment. They had never openly discussed the philosophical or spiritual implications of the treatment. "Blood carries nutrients and oxygen, Your Highness," she replied cautiously. "It's vital, but it doesn't define who we are. Your character, your thoughts, your decisions. That's what makes you a person." "But I used to smell of death," Carlos insisted, with the blunt honesty only a child could muster. "Now I smell different. Better, as if death has retreated from me. Now I smell different. Better, as if death has retreated from me. Doesn't that mean I've fundamentally changed?" Anna Maria considered her response carefully. The prince deserved honesty. "You have changed physically, yes. The treatment has altered certain aspects of your constitution. But your essence, what makes you Carlos Balthazar of Habsburg, remains untouched." The prince seemed to ponder this. "Sometimes I dream of places I've never visited, workshops filled with canvases and paints, or gardens with herbs I can name, though I've never studied them. Are those your memories creeping into me?" This revelation left Anna Maria momentarily speechless. The Archduke's texts had mentioned the possibility of an essence transfer, but she had dismissed it as superstition. Could there be some truth to it? "Dreams are mysterious, Your Highness," she replied at last. "Our minds combine fragments of what we see, hear, and experience, creating images that feel like memories." Carlos looked at her with an intensity almost unsettling in someone so young. "You're not answering my question. I'm asking if I'm now partly you and Diego." Anna Maria held his gaze. "If you're asking whether the treatment has created a special bond between us, the answer is yes. But not because you're less yourself, but because we've contributed to your health and well-being in a unique way." This seemed to satisfy the prince, who nodded slowly. "I like that. It means I'll never truly be alone, even when I'm king and everyone bows to me, but no one speaks honestly." Those words, spoken simply but imbued with a precocious wisdom and loneliness, touched Anna Maria deeply. The child who had smelled of death since birth had grown to understand the burdens of his royal destiny with a clarity few adults could match. "You will always have people who speak honestly with you, Your Highness," she promised, impulsively taking his hand. "Diego and I will be at your side as long as you need us." Carlos smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his youthful face. "I know. That's the only thing in this world of masks and lies that I'm absolutely certain of." This moment of honest connection marked a turning point for Anna Maria. The treatment, which had begun as a desperate attempt to save a sick prince's life, had become something far greater. It had forged bonds that transcended class and protocol, forming an alliance that would shape not only the prince's future, but that of Spain itself. What no one could foresee was that these bonds would soon be tested in a way that even the forbidden texts of Archduke Leopold had not anticipated.